The blockade begins. High Admiral Ventor of the Hegemony Defense Force stood at the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dawn, watching as the last of his fleet's ships slipped into position around Earth. 10,000 vessels, representing the combined might of 17 spacefaring civilizations, now formed an impenetrable barrier around humanity's homeworld. The sight should have filled him with pride. Instead, he felt an inexplicable sense of unease. "Status report," he commanded, his secondary eyes scanning multiple holographic displays while his primary pair remained fixed on the blue-green planet below. "Blockade formation is complete, Admiral," his executive officer, Sub-Commander Ixel, reported. "All ships are in position and maintaining their assigned coordinates with 99.997% accuracy. And the humans? They appear to be..." Ixel hesitated, mandibles clicking in confusion. "They appear to be having a party, sir." Ventor's spine ridges stiffened. "Explain." "We're detecting multiple large gatherings in major population centers. There's music, dancing, and something they're calling a blockade festival. They've even started selling commemorative T-shirts." This wasn't the reaction the Admiral had expected when the Hegemony gave Earth its ultimatum. Join the collective and submit to proper genetic optimization like every other civilized species, or face complete isolation from galactic society. The humans had refused, of course. They were notorious for their stubborn attachment to their biological imperfections, but they were supposed to be afraid, not celebrating. "Sir," Ixel interrupted his thoughts, "we're receiving a transmission from their primary governmental body." "Put it through." The holoscreen flickered to life, revealing a middle-aged human female in what Ventor recognized as formal diplomatic attire. Her expression was pleasant, almost amused. "Good morning, Admiral," she said, smiling. "I'm Secretary General Chen of the United Earth Government. I trust your fleet is settling in comfortably." "Madam Secretary," Ventor replied stiffly, "this is not a social call. The Hegemony's demands are non-negotiable. Until Earth accepts its responsibilities as part of the galactic community." "Oh, we've accepted them," Chen interrupted, still smiling. "In fact, we've just filed all the necessary paperwork to begin our integration process." Ventor's primary hearts skipped a beat. Could it be this easy? Had the show of force actually worked? However, Chen continued, "According to Section 7.3.2.9 of the Hegemony Charter, all new members are entitled to a 10-year cultural adaptation period, during which, according to subsection 12.4, we're permitted to maintain our current biological configuration while we thoughtfully consider the benefits of optimization." The Admiral felt his scales begin to itch. He knew that particular clause. It was meant to ease primitive species into proper civilization. But the humans weren't primitive. They were just obstinate. "Furthermore," Chen added, her smile widening, "we've taken the liberty of registering Earth as a living museum of pre-optimization cultural heritage. The paperwork was just approved by your own bureaucracy about 30 seconds ago." "You? What?" Ventor grabbed a nearby datapad, quickly searching through the regulations. Yes, there it was. A provision allowing certain planets to maintain their original biological diversity for scientific and historical purposes. It was meant for preserving uninhabited worlds. That's not the intended purpose of that regulation," he protested. "Oh, is there a specific clause stating that? Our legal team would be very interested in seeing it." Chen's expression was the picture of innocent curiosity. "We've also filed 3,427 additional forms regarding various aspects of our cultural preservation initiatives. I believe your staff should be receiving them now." On cue, Ixel's console began chiming with incoming messages. The sub-commander's eyes widened in horror as the number of notifications kept climbing. Each of these will need to be processed and responded to within the standard 48-hour window, as per Hegemony regulations, Chen reminded them helpfully. "Oh, and we're also invoking our right to submit all forms in our native languages. We have approximately 7,000 of those, and they'll all need to be properly translated and certified. Ventur felt a headache building behind his primary eyes. This was supposed to be a simple show of force, not a bureaucratic nightmare. Madam Secretary, surely we can. We're just following proper procedures, Admiral, Chen interrupted. After all, isn't that what civilization is all about? Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to attend the opening ceremony of our blockade festival. We're unveiling a new form of dance called the malicious compliance. I think you'll find it both entertaining and legally protected under Statute 5.67 regarding the preservation of emerging cultural expressions. The transmission ended, leaving Ventur staring at empty space. Below, the lights of Earth's cities twinkled innocently, while his console continued to chime with an endless stream of incoming forms, petitions, and cultural preservation requests. Sir, Ixal ventured after a long moment of silence. Should I begin processing these forms? Ventur sank into his command chair, suddenly feeling very tired. Contact Central Command, he ordered. Tell them we may need to reconsider our approach. As he watched Earth rotating peacefully below, he could have sworn he heard the faint sound of music drifting through space, some ancient human song about rules being made to be broken. The blockade was less than a day old, and somehow, he suspected, it was already falling apart. On the planet below, in her office in Geneva, Secretary General Chen leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small chuckle. Phase 1 was proceeding exactly as planned. She picked up her phone. Dr. Santos, you can begin Phase 2 whenever you're ready. And yes, you can use the quantum tunneling device. Just remember to file the proper paperwork first. All 7,000 versions of it. The real game was just beginning. Operation Paperclip. Dr. Maria Santos stood in her underground laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing the status of what her team had dubbed Operation Paperclip. The name was a joke, really. There wasn't a physical piece of paper in sight. Instead, the screen showed thousands of automated systems flooding the hegemony's networks with perfectly legitimate requests, applications, and inquiries, each one requiring individual attention according to their own regulations. How are they handling the latest batch? She asked her AI assistant, Araya. The hegemony's processing centers are operating at 347% capacity, Araya reported, a hint of satisfaction in her synthetic voice. They've had to reassign 12,000 bureaucrats from other sectors just to handle the cultural preservation applications from Earth's cheese-making societies alone. Maria smiled, remembering how that particular initiative had started. Someone in her team had discovered that the hegemony's regulations had no upper limit on how many distinct cultural practices could be registered for preservation. So they'd started registering every single human cultural activity, not just broad categories, but every specific variation. What's today's count? We've submitted applications for 12,463 different pizza-making techniques, 8,927 varieties of tea ceremony, and 15,344 distinct forms of recreational mathematics. Araya paused. The cross-referencing department of the hegemony's central registry has reportedly begun stress counseling sessions. But this was just the smokescreen. While the hegemony's bureaucrats were drowning in paperwork, the real work was happening right here in her lab. Maria walked over to what looked like an ordinary metallic cube sitting on a pedestal in the center of the room. How's our little project coming along? The quantum displacement engine is operating within expected parameters, Araya reported, though I still think calling it a cultural preservation device for maintaining traditional human concepts of spatial relationships was pushing it. But they approved the permit, Maria pointed out. All 7,000 versions of it. The quantum displacement engine was humanity's ace in the hole. While the hegemony's massive fleet enforced their blockade in normal space, Maria's team had been working on something entirely different, something that didn't technically violate any of the hegemony's regulations, mainly because their bureaucrats had never imagined it could exist. Her computer chimed with an incoming message. It was from Secretary General Chen. Dr. Santos, the Hegemony Science Division is requesting a demonstration of our traditional human probability mathematics. They're sending an observer tomorrow. Maria grinned. This was exactly what they'd been waiting for. Tell them we'd be happy to demonstrate, though they should be aware that, according to Section 89.34 of the Cultural Exchange Protocols, they'll need to file an intent to observe form in all Earth languages first. She turned back to her screens, watching as humanity's real plan unfolded beneath the chaos of bureaucratic warfare. The hegemony thought they were dealing with a primitive species trying to exploit loopholes in their regulations. They had no idea that every form, every application, every seemingly ridiculous cultural preservation request was part of a larger pattern. In another part of the facility, Dr. James Chen, no relation to the Secretary General, was putting the finishing touches on what his team called the uncertainty drive. On paper, or rather, in the thousands of forms they'd submitted, it was classified as a device for maintaining traditional human perspectives on quantum superposition states. In reality, it was something that would change the nature of space travel forever. Final calibration complete, he announced over the comm. We're ready for Phase 3 whenever you give the word. Maria checked the status of their other projects. Around the world, similar facilities were preparing similar cultural preservation devices. Each one had been properly registered, documented, and approved by the hegemony's own bureaucracy. Each one was, technically speaking, completely legal according to their regulations. AI, show me the current status of the hegemony fleet. The AI displayed a holographic map of Earth orbit, 10,000 ships, arranged in a perfect blockade pattern. The hegemony was so proud of their military precision, their overwhelming numbers. They never stopped to consider that their very perfectionism might be a weakness. Dr. Santos, AI interrupted her thoughts. I'm detecting increased quantum fluctuations in sectors 7 through 12. The hegemony sensors are picking them up. Right on schedule. Maria nodded. Send out the prepared response about traditional human quantum observation ceremonies. Make sure to file it under cultural religious practices. That'll require them to convene an ethics board before they can investigate. She watched as new alerts appeared on the hegemony's command channels. Their sensors were detecting something they couldn't explain, but their own regulations prevented them from doing anything about it without first going through proper channels. By the time they finished processing the paperwork, it would be too late. Message from Secretary General Chen, Araya announced. She says, the hegemony's Cultural Affairs Office has just approved our application to classify confusion as an protected emotional state. Proceed with Phase 3. Maria took a deep breath. This was the moment they'd been working toward. While the hegemony had been drowning in paperwork, humanity had been building something unprecedented. Something that would demonstrate exactly why trying to force humans to conform to rigid structures was never a good idea. Send the signal, she ordered. Tell all facilities to activate their cultural preservation devices on my mark. Around the world, hidden laboratories hummed to life. In orbit, the hegemony fleet's perfect formation was about to become considerably less perfect. And in her underground lab, Maria Santos prepared to show the galaxy why humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to think outside the box, or in this case, outside normal space-time itself. Begin Phase 3, she commanded. Let's show them what human culture really looks like. The Hidden Fleet. High Admiral Venter's command center aboard the Eternal Dawn had transformed into what humans might call a nightmare of bureaucratic proportions. Holographic screens covered every surface, each displaying a different urgent request requiring his immediate attention. His staff had been working in shifts for 3 days straight, and still the backlog of human applications grew larger. Sir, Sub-Commander Ixel appeared at his side, looking more haggard than any hegemony officer should. We're detecting unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. But what? Ventor asked, dreading the answer. We've received 73,000 applications for traditional human energy signature registration. Each one needs to be processed before we can investigate, and they've all been filed under religious protection status. The Admiral's scales itched furiously. Something was wrong. The humans were up to something beyond mere bureaucratic warfare, but his hands were tied by his own civilization's regulations. Even suggesting they bypass proper procedures would be enough to end his career. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Commander Sarah Martinez watched as the first of humanity's new fleet came online. The massive underwater hangar held what appeared to be ordinary shipping containers, thousands of them, stacked in neat rows. But these weren't containers. They were ships built in plain sight, while the Hegemony's observers were too busy processing paperwork to notice. "Status report," she ordered, her voice echoing through the cavernous space. "All units showing green," her chief engineer reported. "Quantum displacement drives are synchronized. The Hegemony sensors still read us as cultural preservation artifacts." Martinez smiled. The ships were her design, inspired by humanity's long history of hiding things in plain sight. Each vessel was officially registered as a mobile cultural exhibition unit, complete with thousands of pages of documentation about their role in preserving human traditions of spatial displacement. "Begin power-up sequence," she commanded. "Remember, according to our filed permits, we're conducting a traditional human quantum stability ceremony." Throughout the facility, the ships began to hum with energy. The quantum displacement drives, disguised in the Hegemony's records as probability enhancement devices for cultural demonstrations, activated one by one. Each drive created a tiny bubble of altered space-time, a phenomenon that the Hegemony scientists had declared impossible. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving the signal from Dr. Santos. Phase 3 is starting." Martinez nodded. "Send the alert to all ships. Operation Cultural Exchanges go." In orbit, aboard the Eternal Dawn, Ventor's sensors suddenly exploded with alerts. The energy signatures from Earth had intensified, but in patterns that defied conventional physics. Before he could react, his ship's AI announced an incoming transmission. "This is Commander Sarah Martinez of the United Earth Defense Force," a human voice declared. "We're about to begin our scheduled demonstration of traditional human approaches to quantum mechanics. For your safety, please maintain your current positions and refer to Form XJ7249 regarding proper observation protocols." Ventor frantically searched through his files. Form XJ7249 was buried under millions of other human submissions, and according to regulations, he couldn't take action without first reviewing it. Then he saw them. Rising from Earth's oceans came thousands of vessels, each one simultaneously existing and not existing according to his sensors. They moved in ways that should have been impossible, slipping between the quantum states of space itself. "Sir," Ixel's voice cracked with panic. "The human ships, they're not using normal propulsion. They're probability surfing." The Admiral watched in stunned silence as humanity's hidden fleet demonstrated exactly why their species had always made the Hegemony scientists so uncomfortable. Where other races saw the laws of physics as immutable rules, humans saw them as guidelines open to creative interpretation. The human ships danced between his perfectly arranged blockade formation, their quantum drives allowing them to exist in multiple positions simultaneously. Any attempt to intercept them would require filing and intent to interact with quantum state cultural artifacts form in 7,000 languages. "Commander Martinez to all Earth vessels," the human's voice came again, sounding almost cheerful. "Execute maneuver designation, Schrodinger's cat's cradle." The human fleet moved in perfect synchronization, weaving impossible patterns through space. Each ship existed in multiple states at once, creating a web of quantum probability that made the Hegemony's conventional tactics useless. They weren't breaking the blockade. They were simply choosing to exist in states where the blockade wasn't relevant. In her underwater command center, Martinez watched as years of preparation paid off. The hegemony had expected humanity to either submit or try to fight conventionally. They had never considered that humans might simply decide to approach space travel from an entirely different angle. "Status of the quantum web?" she asked. "Complete, Commander. We've established probability fields around every hegemony vessel. They can still move, but," her tactical officer grinned, "they'll need to file the appropriate paperwork first. In all Earth languages, of course." Martinez opened a channel to Secretary General Chen. "Phase 3 is complete, ma'am. The fleet is deployed, and the quantum containment web is in place. Should we proceed to Phase 4? Chen's response came immediately. "Excellent work, Commander. Begin Phase 4, Operation Physics Lesson." Martinez turned to her crew, her expression serious but satisfied. "Send the message to all ships. It's time to show the hegemony why humans never accepted their version of reality as the only possibility." As her orders went out, the quantum drives of Earth's hidden fleet spun up to full power. They hadn't just built ships, they had redefined the nature of space travel itself. And they had done it all while following every single one of the hegemony's regulations. Above, Ventur could only watch as his perfect blockade became increasingly irrelevant. Somewhere in the mountain of unprocessed paperwork on his desk was probably a form explaining exactly how the humans had managed this. He had a feeling he wouldn't like what it said. Dancing between the stars. The space around Earth had become a physicist's worst nightmare, or perhaps their greatest dream. Commander Martinez's quantum fleet moved in patterns that made conventional spaceship tactics look like Stone Age technology. Each vessel existed in multiple states simultaneously, creating a dance of probability that left the hegemony's finest tactical computers struggling to compute basic trajectories. "Status of Operation Physics Lesson." Secretary General Chen's voice came through on the quantum-encrypted channel. "Proceeding exactly as planned," Martinez reported, watching as her fleet continued their elaborate maneuvers. "The hegemony ships are completely surrounded by our quantum probability fields. They can't move without intersecting with at least 3 possible positions of our vessels, which would require filing separate interaction permits for each quantum state." In his command center, High Admiral Ventur was developing what humans called a migraine. His fleet's sensors showed human ships everywhere and nowhere at once. Any attempt to plot an intercept course resulted in his tactical systems displaying the error message. "Insufficient probability documentation filed." "Sir," Sub-Commander Ixel reported, "the humans have just submitted a new batch of cultural preservation documents. They're claiming that their current fleet formation is actually a demonstration of traditional human interpretive dance." Before Ventur could respond, a new transmission cut across all frequencies. Dr. Maria Santos' face appeared on the main screen, looking professionally apologetic. "Good afternoon, Admiral. I hope we're not causing too much confusion. We're simply expressing our cultural heritage of quantum uncertainty appreciation through synchronized fleet movements. I believe you'll find all the necessary permits in Form QM7249B. Subsection Schrodinger's Square Dance." The Admiral's scales were now itching so badly he thought they might fall off. "Dr. Santos," he managed through gritted teeth, "these maneuvers are clearly military in nature." "Oh no, Admiral," Santos replied with a smile. "If you check the definition of military maneuvers in the hegemony's own regulations, you'll find they require ships to maintain single, definitive positions in spacetime. Our ships exist in quantum superposition. Therefore, by your own laws, this can't possibly be a military action. We're simply engaging in cultural expressions of mathematical probability." Meanwhile, in the quantum fleet's flagship, Commander Martinez was coordinating the next phase of their operation. Each ship in her fleet was equipped with what they'd officially registered as a cultural probability enhancement device. In reality, a quantum drive that allowed them to exist in multiple states of spacetime simultaneously. "Begin formation delta," she ordered. And make sure all our quantum states are properly documented in triplicate. The fleet responded instantly, each ship shifting through probability space in perfect synchronization. To the hegemony sensors, it appeared as if the human vessels were everywhere at once, creating a complex web of quantum possibilities that made conventional space travel impossible within their operating area. "Ma'am," her tactical officer reported, "the hegemony fleet is attempting to reposition. Their computers are trying to calculate a safe course through our quantum dance patterns." Martinez smiled. "Send them our latest cultural documentation package, the one about traditional human methods of calculating spatial relationships through interpretive movement." In his command center, Venter watched helplessly as his console was flooded with new documents. Each one required careful review before his ships could move through any space that might intersect with a human vessel's quantum probability field. The humans hadn't just turned physics into their playground. They'd weaponized regulatory compliance itself. "Admiral," Ixel's voice had taken on a slightly hysterical edge. "The humans are now claiming that their quantum probability fields are actually a form of performance art protected under Section 7.39 of the Cultural Heritage Preservation Act. They're calling it Schrodinger's ballet." The human fleet continued its impossible dance, each movement precisely calculated to create maximum bureaucratic confusion while remaining technically compliant with every hegemony regulation. They had turned space itself into a quantum probability maze, and the only way through was to fill out the proper paperwork, all 7,000 versions of it. In her underground laboratory, Dr. Santos watched the operation unfold with satisfaction. The quantum displacement drives were performing beyond expectations, allowing Earth's ships to exist in states of probability that the hegemony's rigid, conventional physics said were impossible. "Dr. Santos," Araya announced, "the Hegemony Science Division has just filed an emergency request for clarification regarding our quantum probability calculations." "Excellent," Santos replied. "Send them our comprehensive explanation package, all 70,000 pages of it. Don't forget to include the appendix on traditional human interpretations of quantum superposition states in modern dance." The hegemony had expected to find a primitive species bound by conventional physics. Instead, they had found humanity, a species that had looked at the laws of physics and decided they were more like guidelines, really. A species that had taken the hegemony's own regulations and turned them into both a shield and a weapon. "Commander Martinez," Secretary General Chen's voice came through again. "Phase 4 is proceeding perfectly. Are you ready to begin Phase 5? Martinez looked at her tactical display, where the hegemony fleet remained frozen in space, paralyzed by the quantum probability fields and buried under mountains of regulatory documentation. "Yes, ma'am. The fleet is in position, and our quantum drives are operating at peak efficiency. We're ready to show the hegemony exactly what happens when you try to box in a species that doesn't believe in boxes." Above Earth, the quantum fleet began to move in new patterns, preparing for the final phase of humanity's response to the blockade. They hadn't just found a way around the hegemony's regulations, they had rewritten the rules of space travel itself. And they had done it all while filing the proper paperwork. Checkmate. Secretary General Chen stood before the emergency session of the Hegemony Council, her expression pleasantly neutral as she faced the assembled representatives of 17 spacefaring civilizations. The massive chamber, designed to showcase the hegemony's power and authority, now felt considerably less impressive after humanity's demonstration of quantum engineering. "Distinguished representatives," she began, "I believe we've all had time to review the events of the past week. Perhaps we should discuss amending the terms of Earth's membership in the galactic community." High Admiral Ventur, called to testify about the blockade's failure, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His scales hadn't stopped itching for days. "The humans have displayed technology that should be impossible," he protested. "Their quantum probability drives violate." "Actually," Dr. Santos interrupted, stepping forward from her position beside Chen, "if you'll refer to Form QM 31415, which we submitted last month, you'll find that our quantum drives don't violate any physical laws. We simply chose to interpret them more creatively. The Council Chamber's holographic displays activated, showing footage of Earth's quantum fleet performing their impossible maneuvers. Ships existing in multiple states simultaneously, turning space itself into a quantum probability field that made conventional navigation impossible without filing the proper paperwork. Furthermore, Santos continued, according to the hegemony's own regulations regarding technological innovation, any development properly documented and registered with the Central Registry is considered legal by default. I believe you'll find we submitted over 3 million pages of technical documentation. In all Earth languages, of course. Commander Martinez, standing at parade rest behind the Earth delegation, allowed herself a small smile as she watched the council members squirm. Her quantum fleet still surrounded the hegemony's blockade force, keeping them trapped in a web of probability fields and regulatory requirements. This is unprecedented, the hegemony's chief scientist declared, his tentacles writhing in agitation. You can't just decide that quantum uncertainty applies to entire spaceships. Why not? Santos asked innocently. There's no regulation specifically forbidding it. In fact, according to Section 92.7 of the Scientific Innovation Charter, and I quote, all species are encouraged to explore unique interpretations of natural laws within their cultural context. We're simply expressing our cultural tradition of thinking outside the box, or in this case, outside conventional spacetime. The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices as representatives argued about regulations, physics, and the proper procedures for handling a species that had effectively weaponized bureaucracy itself. Chen let them argue for exactly 3 minutes before clearing her throat. Distinguished representatives, let me be clear about humanity's position. We are happy to join the galactic community, but we will do so on our own terms. Our quantum technology has been properly registered, our cultural practices have been documented, and all necessary forms have been filed. In septuplicate. She paused, letting her next words carry weight. We are also prepared to share this technology with the hegemony. All we ask is that you recognize our right to remain unoptimized, to continue exploring our unique approach to physics and bureaucracy alike. In her underground laboratory on Earth, AIA monitored the council proceedings while continuing to submit new cultural preservation applications. Dr. Santos, the AI reported, the hegemony's processing centers are now operating at 742% capacity. Their entire bureaucratic system will experience total gridlock in approximately 6 hours unless they accept our terms. The council members were rapidly coming to the same conclusion. Humanity hadn't just found a way around their blockade. They had turned the hegemony's own systems against them so thoroughly that the only way to restore order was to give them what they wanted. Perhaps, the council president said carefully, we have been too rigid in our approach to galactic civilization. A motion has been put forward to recognize Earth's unique cultural and technological contributions, including their alternative interpretation of quantum mechanics. Excellent. Chen smiled. We've taken the liberty of preparing all the necessary documentation for this new arrangement. Only about 12,000 pages of forms to fill out, and we've already translated them into all hegemony languages. High Admiral Ventur watched as humanity's victory was formalized in proper bureaucratic procedure. They hadn't just beaten his blockade. They had changed the very nature of space travel while following every single regulation to the letter. His scales would probably never stop itching. In orbit, Commander Martinez's quantum fleet began a new series of maneuvers, this time officially classified as a cultural celebration of probability mathematics, through synchronized fleet movement. Each ship danced through multiple states of possibility, their quantum drives humming with energy that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. Back in the council chamber as the final documents were being processed, Dr. Santos approached Ventur. Admiral, I hope there are no hard feelings. We've prepared a small gift for you. A quantum probability calculator, certified as a cultural exchange artifact. It only exists in a superposition of 7 different states, so you'll only need to file 7 sets of paperwork to accept it. The Admiral stared at her for a long moment before letting out a sound that might have been a laugh. "You humans," he said finally, "are going to change everything, aren't you?" "Oh no, Admiral," Santos replied with a smile. "We're just going to fill out the proper forms to request permission for change, all 7,000 versions of them." As humanity took its place in the galactic community, their quantum ships continued their impossible dance through probability space, a constant reminder that sometimes the best way to think outside the box was to exist in multiple boxes simultaneously. And always, always file the proper paperwork.